Messieurs, mesdames, je vais parler l'anglais. It's a privilege and an honor to be here today. The Positive Economy Index is based on a welcome and a very necessary development in looking at economic growth and prosperity. It differs really from the 20th century thinking of a continually increasing GDP as a panacea, and instead emphasizes the urgency of taking into account the future generations' well-being. It revolves around moving from traditional thinking of rational economics to greater social adaptability. I could mention a few challenges which I think actually are going to be one of the key, some of the key issues in the 21st century and why they need to be encountered with a different approach than in the 20th century. It would not be off to call these times we are living now a true paradigm shift. The challenges we face are on most accounts so novel that we have a hard time getting our head around them, let alone finding solutions. You were talking about the participation of every citizen here before. But how are we going to encounter the developments in communication and human connections that are already having a huge effect, for example, on our political discourse, which in Iceland, at least, is taking place ever more within different echo chambers on the internet? Is this increasing polarization? And could this new discourse be a threat to democracy? This is just one of the many effects of the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution and the great technological changes that have followed. And it's nearly impossible to imagine any sector of society that hasn't been or won't be influenced by these changes. And so I especially find it very interesting to see the fact that you're talking about having framework for artificial intelligence, so it will be actually serving everybody. When it comes to climate issues, we are of course looking at mammoth of challenge. In Iceland, we see the glaciers retreating every year. At the same time, the Nordic countries have been suffering unprecedented droughts this past summer. The world was presented last month with yet another important warning about the dire consequences of climate change. We have 12 years to limit a potential climate change catastrophe from hitting us full force. And the cost of not dealing with that could be stupendous. I think the way nations will challenge these new challenges, technological change and climate change, will be consequential, not to mention the aging population which every nation is dealing with in Europe. I believe our success will depend on whether or not our response will guarantee three fundamentals: equality, sustainability, and democratic principles. Successful societies of the future will be the ones that ensure an equilibrium between these three factors. And when I talk about sustainability, I emphasize the importance of building a diverse economy, strong social infrastructures, and using our resources wisely without over-exploiting them. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Iceland, because the case of Iceland is rather a curious one. We have asked ourselves, are we a possible role model for other countries when it comes to quality of life, or are we more a statistical anomaly? And most likely it's a bit of both. To many people who visit us, they find the country a mystery. How can such a small economy be so well off? Economics of scale really don't apply here. In 1918, Iceland was one of the poorest countries in Europe, living in the outskirts of what was considered to be humanly possible. Today, we are one of the richest countries in Europe, in a thriving modern welfare state. We are a microstate. I believe we have a population similar to the city of Nice. We have our own currency, which a lot of people find odd. We have a symphony orchestra, we have professional theaters, we have an opera house, we have our own language, which has been really important for us all this time. We also have 60 golf courses, and you can play there during the night in the summer. We have 63 MPs, and we have men's football team that was only a few minutes from winning the French world champions in a friendly match a month ago. So we have had our ups and downs in our 1150 years of history, and mostly downs for several centuries after the Viking era, but a remarkable success for the past 100 years. The history of Iceland is one of survival and prosperity. And as Iceland was consumed by disastrous eruptions and deadly diseases in the late 18th century, the Danish king actually considered closing down the colony of Iceland and moving the entire population to Denmark. But we are very lucky that he didn't do that. We have never been famous for long-term planning. We come from a traditional hunter society. Either there is fish to catch, and plenty of it, or there is none. We are used to great fluctuations in our economy, and only 10 years ago, we were hit by the direst economic crisis in our times of our republic. Now we are actually booming again. But I think gradually, we're also getting better in long-term planning, thinking it might be a good idea to save part of the catch for the difficult years. And what is more important is that we're getting better at valuing the environment and understanding what matters for the coming generations. Our government has a very clear vision of how we can tackle the future challenges, those I mentioned here before and many more. It will be paramount that we can adapt the foundations of society to a new reality so that prosperity will reach all and not just the few. I could mention a few factors that I think are essential. I would first like to mention a fully funded pension system, which is a good indicator of good long-term planning in Iceland. Our economy, as I mentioned, has been thriving with good economic growth and trade balance coupled with low inflation and low unemployment. Actually, an extremely high labor participation is characteristic of the Icelandic economy. The male employment rate is actually the highest in the world. And in fact, the female employment rate is higher than the employment rate of men in other European countries, which is quite exceptional. We have put increased emphasis on supporting education, innovation, and research. We actually started doing that in the years following the collapse of the economy in 2008. And it is my firm conviction and belief that we need more pillars because we are a small economy. So we need more pillars. We need an environment, a business environment that supports a diverse economy where we have small and medium-sized businesses that can flourish. And the most important parts for that is a good education system, good funding for research and innovation, public investment in innovation. And we are actually now watching a significant growth in the high-tech industry of Iceland. You were talking a little bit also about the education system here before. And I think a focus on creative and critical thinking, democratic participation, and literacy continues to be a foundation of the Icelandic education system. And when we think about the challenges of artificial intelligence and technological changes, it is our conviction that creativity, the human way to look at things, will be the key factor for us humans to survive that technological revolution. It's also very important because I mentioned here before the aging population and the pension system, but we also need to think how we can use the technology that we are seeing now developing to improve and develop the Nordic model of welfare and digitalizing the healthcare system and medical services. In Iceland, because there are only 350,000 of us living in quite a big area actually, the distances between homes can be quite far, making it difficult to facilitate timely access to medical professionals. So telemedicine as well as health technology may prove to be revolutionary for the people of Iceland. Now, I talked about climate, and we aim for Iceland to become carbon neutral in 2040. We have already introduced a new climate action plan to step up our game in fighting against climate change, ensure that we do not overexploit our natural resources, and the strategy consists of 34 initiatives ranging from a carbon tax to the important issue of food security, which was also mentioned here before, from recovering wetlands to setting up a fund to support climate-friendly technologies and innovation, putting a ban on registering new gasoline or diesel-powered vehicles by 2030. This is a core issue, and we have actually done this before. We currently use renewable energy for electricity and heating. Now we need to produce that same energy shift for transport, so we could call this the third renewable revolution in Iceland. I think we also have something to offer other nations when it comes to sustainable fisheries. Due to the emphasis that is placed on sustainable utilization of resources and on research and development, Iceland's fisheries sector occupies a very enviable position internationally, and we also aim to take steps to make the fisheries sector carbon neutral. It's very important when we talk about this that we need to build up the social infrastructure. I talked about pension funds, the health system, the education system. And it's very important when we fund this that the tax system is just and it's fair. Equality is a key factor to ensure prosperity. And that's one of the indicators where Iceland is doing very well. Equality actually gives each individual the agency to create his or her own opportunities. And that's a core issue for the economy of the future. But technological innovations that will almost certainly impact the labor market and radical changes might affect the people on the labor market very differently. And maybe in a few decades we will have to rethink our taxing system completely to adjust to a new labor market where we will see greater automation, and there also the education system will play a vital role to ensure the mobility of people. Now finally, back to the issue of indices. According to an index compiled by Gallup called an index of negative emotions, and we're talking about positive economy here today, but they have an index of negative emotions, the world's mood is souring quite a bit. And when looked at in tandem with another measure on how content people are with their lot in life, it becomes clear that people are on average increasingly unsatisfied with their lives. And that's an interesting question. Apparently 70% of human behavior is based on emotions, not reasons, and that is something that we should pay attention to when it comes to introducing new policies and measures in today's context. And that's why the participation of everybody is so important for policymakers to be able to ensure that the policies will work for the benefit of the public good. If the general mood in the world is one of pessimism, we could be in for a rough ride. The loss of hope can be devastating. If people believe that nothing is improving, that things in general are getting worse, they may lose confidence in the very measures that can actually work to change things for the better. And we have seen a loss of confidence in Icelandic politics, in Icelandic institutions after the economic crisis. We are gradually gaining confidence, but that will also be a very important factor so we can tackle the challenges together with the people of Iceland. And then we must also emphasize the positive. We must emphasize what can be done. We must lead by example. And I think doing that might actually be part of Iceland's secret of success. It is my firm conviction that we are on the right track with regard to our climate plan, with regard to our good results when it comes to gender equality, even though we're not nearly there yet. With the building of social infrastructure and creating an environment for a sustainable, diverse economy that will rely more and more on research and innovation. It goes without saying that building a more sustainable future for the public good is in our common best interest. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be able to share experiences with you and how we can work together for that goal. Thank you very much.